Hey everyone, we are back with another update video, and with me as always is Corey.
Hey, what's up, guys?
To jump right in, obviously on the Megadrive side, we've been done with the actual game for a while. The PCBs are being produced, and as of now, roughly as of a week ago, the first batch have been shipped out by NeoFid to the Megadrive backers. They are shipping them out in order of who backed the Kickstarter campaign first, except for if for whatever reason they still don't have quite enough info from you guys to actually mail it out to you. So please do keep an eye out for emails from NeoFid Studios or from Kickstarter. Check your junk mail filter folders and stuff like that. Make sure that if they sent you an email that you get them whatever information is required. And on the PC version side of things, I have been making pretty steady progress all this time, continuing on the final boss fight. To not spoil anything, there's a lot of sort of attacks that the boss can do, and so they're all implemented, and for a while now I've been in the polishing and debugging phase of that, but there's still a lot to go to make it really perfect and on par with how the Megadrive version turned out. So that's what I'm working on the PC side of things.
Yeah, and on the art book side, at this point, I'm just in the process of nudging things, tweaking things, making sure everything's aligned properly, sizes and things like that, and getting the actual real art in there. We had a lot of placeholder stuff going on for a little while, so
Yep.
Yeah, getting the actual art in there, especially since a lot of the Neo Geo art is well on its way to completion as far as the in-game stuff.
Yep, and it's been a lot of fun. It's looking great, and we have by now the vast majority of the text roughed in, so we know on most pages what the general idea is going to be for each bit of text that goes along with the images. But so yeah, progress continues very well on the art book as well. And then obviously, since focus is very strongly shifting back toward Neo Geo now, since the Megadrive version is done, we thought this would be a cool opportunity in these update videos to kind of show you guys the behind the scenes, as they say, how the sausage is made, so to speak. Right. And so first we'll kind of rewind a bit to artwork that's some of which has been done for a while. So first we'll through some of the core enhancements for the Neo Geo version.
The idea is that on the Mega Drive, for a lot of the bosses, we were limited with color palettes. So you can see here, this boss had to use the hero color palette. And so you can see he had a lot of this sort of silvery blue in his fur. And so on something like Neo Geo, we can give every character their own palettes. And so they can be true to the original colors. Thankfully, on the Mega Drive, that frosty color sort of
worked out fine.
Environment. But that's just a little preview of a boss. I didn't want to get too heavy into boss stuff, but
yeah, exactly. This is the level 2 boss, and just to go a little nerdy, a little deeper into the technical side of things, to give you guys an idea of the difference in colorability between the Mega Drive and the Neo Geo. The Mega Drive could display a grand total of 4 16-color palettes. So any one thing like a sprite or an environment tile, it had to pick between one of 4 16-color palettes. So for the Mega Drive version, to keep things well organized and to allow for some kind of game visual communication tech, like certain things to be able to brighten or flash when you hit them or things like that, we basically had 2 palettes to use for the environment, 1 palette that was mostly used for all the sprites, the hero and most basic enemies and explosions and everything, and then a brightened version of that palette for the most part. We did some trickery to get additional colors in there, sharing part of an environment palette sometimes, and having like a couple of indexes for the 2 what we would call sprite palettes that we could change per level or when there's a special enemy on screen. But in general, you could imagine that's pretty limited, and of course Corey did an incredible job making DaemonClaw look gorgeous and very colorful within those color limits. But with the Neo Geo, there's 256 16-color palettes that you can use. I guarantee you most game developers, even back in the day, today, even the AAA games, didn't come close to using all 256 16 color palettes on screen. But it's really cool that they're available, and what this allows us, and especially Corey's handling pretty much all of this. So like obviously for this boss, you could see Corey was able to give him his own color scheme where the things don't have to share the exact colors as the heroes or the explosions, or so therefore his fur doesn't have to be such an icy cyan blue. And it's not just the enormous amount of 16 color palettes that you can use on the Neo Geo. Another limitation of the Mega Drive is the color fidelity, meaning you have like an R, G, and B, red, green, and blue slider, and it's very limited on the Mega Drive. There's it's called 3 bits per channel. Basically what that means is if you try to make a smooth color range, there's a pretty big jump between one shade of a color and another, and it's the same thing with blending red with green. There's a pretty big jump when you try to slide that color slider. And then so absolutely. The grand total of colors that you can make on the Mega Drive, like just every combination of sliding the red, green, and blue slider on the Mega Drive, there's a total of 512 unique looking colors.
But yeah, Neo Geo is way more capable. I think it's even higher, I think, than Super Nintendo.
Twice
right?
as high. Yep.
Fidelity.
Twice as high. So So imagine 512 total possible colors to be able to make with your color sliders. The Super Nintendo, which is also already fantastic and has very high color fidelity, the Super Nintendo was capable of over 32,000 distinct colors, but then the Neo Geo is twice that many, so around 65,000 unique colors. So the color fidelity, you could just add colors and nuance to the screen that literally is just not possible on the Mega Drive. So let's move on to some of the other screens. Here's an example of the Neo Geo Enhanced Level 4, and there's more subtlety in the back layer. It's better blended, better atmosphere. And again, with all of these things, Corey is able to go back to the art that was designed originally for the Mega Drive and get rid of those compromises in hue or value shift where he couldn't get exactly what he wanted, so he had to find the best that the Mega Drive could do. Like now, so like
those darker values now especially can be a little more true to what they need to be. And the reason I included this example is if you notice like how the floor here has like a little bit of different shading going on. The thing about the Neo Geo is there is no actual tile map going on with the maps. It's just big chunks of level sprite. So that this is why you would get games like Metal Slug and all these things with what seems like just a big
freehand
image
drawn
for a level, because that's pretty much what you end up with. So I was able to go in and do a little more lighting and stuff, like a little mood lighting on the cave, to make some areas more lit. So it appears a little creepier, basically overall.
And then this too, the flame, you were able to get more noticeable and bigger area of affected light by the torchlight.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, but really nice stuff. And then let's move on to the next one. And going back to what Corey said, a crazy thing about the Neo Geo is everything is sprites. The environment is sprites. They just gave that system an enormous amount of sprite power and basically said, screw everything else. Let's just give it an incredible amount of sprite power so we could just do everything with sprites. And that kind of consolidated all of the tech to this one thing that they could make very powerful with all the color palettes, a ton of sprites, and scaling.
Yeah, this level, basically since the level foreground pieces, instead of it being a tile map, are just large sprites, we had to figure out a way to do the snow on Neo Geo as opposed to Mega Drive, which used a sort of animated tile effect. And there will be foreground snow as well, just like on Mega Drive. I just didn't include it in this example. But basically, while I was doing that, I was like, well, we can animate the whole chunk of this sprite because it's going to be unique on the cartridge anyways. And this is 8 frames. So I was able to finally put in what I originally wanted on this environment, was like a dense fog effect, which is what the background is sort of hinting at back there, but we never quite pulled off, in the Mega Drive version. And so now you can can just bake it in. I made the effect and baked it into the tile chunks.
It's nice for Corey to be able to flex the Neo Geo's muscles more, to use more memory and more performance because it can spare it on the Neo Geo. So we get to have those additional cool, not only the color nuance, but the additional atmospheric effects, which is really cool. And to get back to Corey's point, the simple point is Corey had to make these giant animated strips that make the level for the snow. Yeah. And he looked down at the ground at the bottom of the strip and said, I'm already animating this whole strip, so I might as well animate a fog effect down there too. So leave it to Corey to always go the extra mile, and it looks great. As always, fantastic job, Corey. And then the screens are a really nice breakdown of how things are on the Megadrive version and what we're able to do on the Neo Geo. So if you look here, all of the enemies share this one palette, and it's the same palette as the hero. It's the same palette as, like, in general, a fireball or an explosion. So you could see here, there's additional color nuance, and that allowed Corey to actually even add more detail. So it's not even just fixing the colors to make them more nuanced and make them exactly how Corey would have made them in the first place on the Megadrive if the Megadrive had better color fidelity. It's going in and adding a bit more detail when it's possible. And you can see this back mountain here is actually now really nice and subtle and snow-capped and a lot more detailed. You got a better gradation going up toward the clouds, another really nice subtle shade going on up there, and just things feeling more natural. This is what we're talking about, where here there's less indexes to spare and less color fidelity, so the further back trees here had to be a little more saturated than Corey probably would have liked toward the blue or cyan.
Exactly. Yeah.
And here he's able to make really nice natural muted colors that just don't fight with the kind of distance they're supposed to be in visually. You can see these really nice, subtle, much more calm colors in the background. And then you could see here, so while they shared one palette with the hero on the Megadrive, we're able to give each enemy variant their own distinct palette, as well as now they're all separate from the hero palette. And that would allow us to do other cool things, like there's the concept in the game of when the hero is fully powered magically, he can get like an energy cloak around him, and that way if he gets hit, instead of losing health, the energy cloak dissipates, right? And the way we did that in the Megadrive version was to just use that brightening palette. So he would just brighten a bit and he'd flicker back and forth between the normal and the brightened palette. But on the Neo Geo, we could easily make a custom color pulsing effect specifically on the hero, because only the hero will be using a hero designated palette. Already in the Neo Geo version, there's a easier to see visual distinction between getting bumped where you did not get hurt and getting hurt where the player will like flash red for a second if you got hurt and just flash white a little bit for a second. But like for the energy cloaks, we could make them match the color scheme of the magic of that level. So flamey oranges and yellows in level 1 and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and there are a few other instances throughout the game with boss fights I won't talk about, but where we're doing palette flashes on that same palette for different sprites and enemies and things like that. Yeah, any of that on Neo Geo can just have whatever colors we want it to have, as opposed to like we've got that one brightening palette
and that's it.
Yeah,
exactly. And then here's a great example of just the additional level of nuance. Look at how smooth these color ranges can be, the Neo Geo palette, and how much more subtle and nuanced and better blended they could be.
You see a lot, like there's a lot of spots in level 2 with bridges and things where you can see a lot of the background. So I knew it needed a little more color nuance than some of the other backgrounds, even in Neo Geo. So I was able to split it. There's so much going on with the sky and everything. I needed 3 different palettes to pull this off. So
Yep, and that's like a cool balancing of the different abilities of the systems. So one enormous strength of the Megadrive, because it was designed back then to be very mindful of memory. Memory was very limited and very expensive back when the Megadrive was made. So there were really cool built-in features to get a lot of bang for your buck. And one of those tricks was that you could slice your layers into a bunch of different segments. So if you could imagine these different layers of clouds here, they could be made to scroll at different speeds, which we do, of course, a lot on the Mega Drive version. And that's just a built-in feature of the hardware to get a massive amount of additional parallax, the illusion of a lot more layers of depth, without having to use a bunch more sprites or an enormous amount of animation tiles to create the illusion that things are moving when it's just animated tiles. That is another possible trick, but you're really trading off cartridge space and visual memory to get that effect. But anyway, the point is, on the Mega Drive, that kind of parallax is very easy to do. On the Neo Geo, you have to use more sprites. So in order for us to get a similar amount of parallax, we'll call it slicing, they all have to be different sets of sprites. But the benefit of that on the Neo Geo, the trade-off is, even though you're using more sprites, which luckily it can afford since it can display so many, the benefit is every sprite can use its own 16-color palette. So that's especially one of the reasons Corey was able to get so much nice additional detail and color variety into this background. And as always, really great work, Corey. That looks fantastic. And then this is an actual example of how the animated snow works. This is... do you remember how wide is it? 64 or 32 pixel wide?
I think it's 64
Yes,
pixels
that's what I
wide.
thought. Yeah. So 64 pixel wide sprites that are as tall as the whole screen, and this is the 8 frames for the snow pattern. And of course, Corey had to carefully design the snow pattern, so by the time it's done with its 8 frames, this snowflake almost certainly becomes this one, and so on and so forth.
It's
so
definitely tricky,
Yeah, like you can't just, oh, I have 8 frames, let me make this snow fall all the way to the ground. You have to be really tricky and make it so that each snowflake transitions into a close enough other snowflake, and then that one transitions into this one, so that out of this looping 8-frame animation, you have an infinite loop of snowflakes that seem to make it all the way from the top of the screen all the way to the ground. Just one of the many kind of tricks that had to be done to get all of this nice atmospheric effect into the game. And that's it for the stuff that Corey's been working on the Neo Geo graphics side until recently. But one of the remaining things to do for things that are specific to the Neo Geo version is some full screen scrolling scenes to kind of set up the intro of the game for during what we call the attract mode, where the arcade cabinet is trying to get the attention of players, trying to get them to stop in front of the machine and put their quarters in there or tokens. And so we thought it would be interesting to show you guys the kind of creative process for how something like that gets designed. And it's pretty funny how simple and ugly it can start. So we thought it would be fun to kind of show you guys the process and how messy, especially to long industry veteran artists, we can show each other scribbles, but we can understand where those are going and what they'll become. Basically, what I had envisioned was a slowly vertically scrolling full screen scene where we have one of the level 1 enemies, a Birdman, gliding down from the sky with his sword and shield ready into a village that's clearly under attack, and in the extreme foreground, obviously there's buildings behind him and a sky, and then you have running villagers and stuff like that. So the first thing I did was create just some obviously super loose, very undetailed blobs that capture the right general shape and size of things so that I could test it to see, is this scene going to work the way I imagine it? And so I used Construct, which is actually the thing that we're making the modern/PC version of DaemonClaw with. I actually used it to quickly get the screen working, to get it scrolling. So I'm going to play that really quickly just so you guys can see. Picture it fading from black as it appears, and then right about there, this where the scrolling stops, it would be fading out again. The Birdman would not sink into the ground like that. Ignore that. But so that gave me the confidence that the scene is going to work, the perspective is going to look good, and everything is the right general size and position relative to each other. So that allowed me to take it to the next step, which is starting to actually detail and clean up the art. And this is still very far from done, but hopefully you could really get a feeling for what this final scene is going to look like. And in a future update, there will be more than this one scene for attract mode. We're probably going to keep those a secret until the game is released, but over the upcoming videos, you'll be able to see this get more and more cleaned up and then finished, on top of the other stuff that we'll start revealing to you. Eventually the second playable character and a lot more actual gameplay footage of specifically the Neo Geo version. But we thought it would be fun for you guys to actually see and kind of participate more in the actual creative process of some Neo Geo specific stuff. But anyway, so you could see, and of course I work in layers, so there's the big Birdman there, and then who actually is not in the proper Z order, there we go. And then the foreground villagers, mom clutching a baby, and this is like a kind of a villager with a sword, or he could be like a city guard or something like that. He's trying to muster his courage. I hope you could tell by the goofy scribble of a face. He's trying to muster his courage to actually help defend the town, and obviously the mom and the baby. This is going to be probably an older white-haired guy on the ground. Another Birdman had already landed. There's one that landed on the roof. The roofs are on fire. You know, it's this here is going to be like a tipped over cart, and there's going to be something spilling out. We're not sure yet what, but that's the idea. So you could see it starts as blobs. We call it blocking in, and that's a term in classical painting too. You get the general shape, sometimes the general color or value. You work out the placement and the proportions of everything. You work out your scene, and then you start refining and adding more detail, more color, and fixing things up as you go. So that's the process for this, and we look forward to showing you this as it gets all polished up and fully detailed.
Yeah, this is looking fantastic so far.
Thanks.
But also, if you guys do enjoy these more artsy sort of discussions, it's akin to the content we used to make a lot more of, that we would like to do more of course.
Yeah.
There's a whole plethora of content on our channel from the past, like forensic mixology videos and things like that. We get into a lot of nuanced discussions about these things and game creation. So we like being a bit of a, I don't know, inspiration if we can, or educational content.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, if you like that kind of stuff, not only have we made those kind of videos in the past, but it's only a matter of time when we're less crunched on DaemonClaw. We'll definitely be getting back into that. So please do comment and subscribe if you're interested in that kind of stuff, and feel free to make requests or ask questions about any aspect of retro game development, pixel art, especially animation, all that kind of stuff we love nerding out about. And if we could be helpful or entertaining and interesting in that regard, we'd love to do it. So, but that's about it for this update. Stay tuned for the next one, and that's it for this one. Thanks everyone, as always, so much for watching and for your support.
If you enjoy our content and want to keep up to date on our games, please leave a like and subscribe. Also, if you want to support our projects, consider becoming a patron. The link's in the description, and we'll see you soon.